In case you haven't heard, bin Laden's dead. That's good. But that's not a foreign policy. There is no coherent foreign policy at a time when we need one.
We keep hoping that something's going to change, but it isn't.
One of the ramifications of an Obama presidency is that defense is not going to grow.
The coordinated, pre-planned, and brazen attacks against the U.S. consulate in Benghazi on September 11th was an outrage.
The security was lax.
It appears to many Americans that this administration failed to adequately protect U.S. personnel.
The president has been skipping his daily intelligence briefings.
With respect to Iran, I very much want to see a diplomatic resolution to the problem.
The president's Iran policy lacks credibility.
We're not going to let Iran get a nuclear weapon.
The question is whether or not President Obama's defense budget is big enough to deal with the major crises and potential challenges the United States faces around the world.
As far as the Middle East is concerned, this president's national security policy has been an abysmal failure.
The arrogance and dishonesty is a little bit breathtaking.
You have to understand what's going on here, folks. There is a circle-the-wagon operation around Barack Obama that nobody's going to penetrate.
In very close contact with countries like Turkey and Jordan that immediately border Syria, and obviously Israel, which is having already grave concerns, as we do, about movements of chemical weapons that might occur in such a chaotic atmosphere.
Are we better off in the Middle East now than we were 4 years ago? Absolutely not. Why? Because the policies of the administration and the way it's been handling itself.
When a president of the United States apologizes to religious fanatics while they're killing young Americans, this is profoundly wrong.
We would like to hold Obama accountable for an absolute disastrous foreign policy.
President Obama starting off his second term with a foreign policy crisis. 4 Americans murdered in Libya. The Obama administration getting hammered for its handling of the terror attack in Benghazi. For weeks, the administration claiming the September 11th attack was a response to a YouTube video. The same video that sparked violent protests around the world, including outside the U.S. Embassy in Cairo. Now, since the Arab Spring, we have seen big changes in the volatile region. So how will President Obama handle foreign policy in the next 4 years? We asked our experts. I know it's a complicated issue and it's terrible to reduce things to sound bites, but is there a way to describe our current foreign policy?
Well, we're in a very complex situation because we have a number of urgent foreign policy problems. Iran, Syria, the evolution of the Arab Spring. Then we have a number of fundamental changes that are going on in the distribution of the world economy and of world power, rise of China, conditions in Russia. And then a number of problems that are new, like environment, energy. We have not developed a coherent approach because in the first term you learn your job. But that's the challenge that the administration is facing.
People look to the United States for leadership. They look to us because we have for so long been in a position where we've been able, because of our resources, because of our military strength, because of our values, where we've been able to keep the peace and where we've been able, frankly, when it was necessary, to make sure our enemies feared us and to make sure that our allies knew they could count on us. And when we step back, as we did during President Obama's first term, and as I'm afraid we're going to continue to do during his second term, it leaves a vacuum. And you see what happens when there's a vacuum. You end up with people who very often don't share our interests diving into that vacuum and filling it.
I travel all over the Middle East. Every Middle Eastern leader that I talk to believes the United States is weak and leaving, and they are having to accommodate to that eventuality, whether it be the Pakistan and the Taliban and the Haqqani network, or whether it be the Saudis as to their, in Bahrain, you name it, the country. They are accommodating to American weakness and withdrawal. And that means that they accommodate then to some of these terrorist outfits, such as Al-Qaeda and others, that they are going to have to live with, they think, because there's not any way to get rid of them.
I see the Mideast deteriorating. I think the last 4 years have been a failure by the Obama administration to realistically assess the threats that exist. The Arab Spring no one saw coming, including me, but we probably all should. But after the Arab Spring, this administration has had a hands-off policy. When they were trying to throw Gaddafi out, Libya became a killing zone. If it were not for Secretary Clinton and Ambassador Rice at the time pushing the president, I don't think we'd ever gotten involved in Libya. Thank God that Gaddafi's gone. But once you take the dictators down, Mubarak leaves, we have no game plan to manage the Arab Spring. We need to be on the ground training a Libyan army to replace the militias. I went in September of last year with Marco Rubio, John McCain and myself and Mark Kirk went to Libya. And we came back and said the biggest threat to Libya making it is these militias. We need to help the Libyans train a national army. They were willing to pay for it. In Egypt, we really have led from behind. This idea of having a hands-off policy towards Syria is about to blow the whole region up. The war is now coming to Israel. It's affecting Turkey. It's affecting Iraq. It's affecting Lebanon. So I really believe if the president doesn't change his strategy and start leading from the front, that Syria and Iran are going to all come together and we're going to have a major conflict in the Mideast.
What's the best thing we got out of the Arab Spring so far?
Well, you'd have to give me some time to think about that. I mean, the fact is that while authoritarian regimes have been overthrown, the likelihood is they will simply be replaced by other authoritarian regimes, or in some cases, Yemen and Libya perhaps qualify here, the countries descend into anarchy, where parts are controlled by al-Qaeda or other terrorist groups, and where the quote-unquote successor government really controls very little territory. So I think overall the Arab Spring has not brought democracy and sweetness and light to the Middle East. It's brought a deterioration of the security situation and a deterioration of American interests and those of friends and allies like Israel and the oil-producing Arab states.
You know, there's such a division when it comes to domestic policy. When you on the sort of the foreign platform, when you go into foreign policy, there's a lot of similarity, and it's hard to draw a distinction, I think, on many things. I assume you disagree with me on that.
Yeah, I do disagree.
I figured you would.
No, I think there are huge differences. I mean, I think that this is a president, frankly, I would say there are big differences between this president and many Democratic predecessors. This is a president who does not believe, and I say that not because I just think it, but because he said it himself. He doesn't believe in an America ascendant in the world. You know, the president went to the United Nations in 2009 and said any world order that elevates one nation above the others won't long survive. And you know, he really, I think, came into office believing that the world is safer if America is less powerful.
I guess I didn't mean necessarily what was said, but sort of what was done. I mean, it seems that administrations oftentimes are in the position of where they just try to maintain or manage, and you can't really correct any of these crises in the world.
Well, he's not doing a very good job at either maintaining or managing. I mean, to the extent he's had success, whether it was the killing of Osama bin Laden or the drone program, that's clearly building on programs that were started under the Bush administration. But at every turn, whether you're talking about you know, not leaving any kind of a stay-behind force in Iraq or announcing a date certain for our withdrawal from Afghanistan, you know, not supporting the people in Iran when they rose up in 2009 in the Green Revolution, walking away from what had been a very strong and solid support of democracy in the Bush administration, treating the war on terror like a law enforcement matter. I mean, we've talked about that before, but, you know, coming into office and then determining that we're going to bring terrorists into America, onto American soil, and give them rights. That didn't happen, though. But I mean, it didn't happen because people rose up and had him, you know, forced him to stop.
Is it too simplistic to ask this question? Do we have more influence now in the world than we did, for instance, when you were Secretary of State, or do we have less influence?
We had more immediate influence. But the present world has a greater need of being reshaped, because we could operate within a more or less existing structure. And the present world has to change its structure. If you look at the Middle East, we are used to thinking of states because that's what we have learned all our lives. But in the Middle East states were created only around 1920. They were the results of World War I, and they were built by European countries that were balancing their own rivalries. So countries like Syria, Iraq, Jordan, the Gulf states had no existence before that, and some are more recent. So when a revolution occurs there, what you see is that you may have Shiites and Sunnis in one state, and then Sunnis in another state, and then you may have a tendency of uniting the religious groups across borders, so that not only do the states have revolutions, but the whole system is in upheaval there.
How do you describe President Obama's policy as it relates to Syria, Iran, Egypt, that area of the world?
I think President Obama is, to a degree, agrees with me. He is a non-interventionist. I think he wants to stay out of the Syrian war. I think there are people pushing him toward getting into that war. I think with regard to Iran, I think the President and the Pentagon do not want war with Iran, but there are people in this country, certainly Bibi Netanyahu and his allies in the United States, are almost monomaniacal on this issue of the alleged Iranian threat to build nuclear weapons. I think the President does not want to fight another war. And I think he's right in that. And I think when he says we got to engage in nation building at home, he is right in tune with the American people.
I think it's very clear that the lack of American leadership and weak American leadership has sent a signal to the Middle East that we don't want to lead. Iraq, one of the more tragic aspects, for example, we lost over 4,000 brave young Americans. We had intended to leave a residual force. The President obviously didn't want that to happen. We now see Iraq unraveling. We see the Kurds going their own way. We see a dramatic increase in violence. They just condemned their vice president to death. I mean, it's clearly unraveling, and al-Qaeda has now set up training camps in western Iraq. Iranian airplanes are overflying Iraq with weapons for the Syrians. In Syria, because of our failure to intervene in any way, like providing arms and establishing a safe zone, al-Qaeda is coming in there in droves. When this thing ends, and all conflicts do end sooner or later, we're going to have one heck of a time with the al-Qaeda elements that have moved into Syria, and it's going to be very, very difficult. The Iranians continue on the path to nuclear weapons. Afghanistan is also unraveling to the degree that everybody thinks the United States is leaving, because that's what the president said, and so they are accommodating to that eventuality. North Africa, northern Mali has been taken over by al-Qaeda. So weak and feckless American leadership has led to enormous, shall I say, long-term challenges and chaos and, frankly, difficulties that we will be facing for a long time.
If you were president, which country would keep you up more at night, Egypt or Syria?
Probably Syria. Egypt is very concerning also, but Syria is a much more near-term problem in terms of the upheaval that's underway in Syria, in terms of their relationship with Iran, because we know, for example, the North Koreans built a nuclear power plant in Syria. Because if Syria falls apart and if the extremists take over in this situation, you have a real potential for spillover. And I think that one of the places where, we should have acted sooner was in Syria, to move in there, to provide support, to provide assistance, to tell people, look, we will support those who are fighting for their freedom here, who are the good guys. And you have a situation where the Iranians are clearly working so hard to help ensure that those who have an extremist ideology prevail, working so hard to ensure that Bashar Assad stay in power. You've got to say to yourself, well, wait a second, why is it the Iranians care so deeply about Syria? So I would be very concerned about Syria, given its ties to terrorism, given its history. But, frankly, across the Arab world, you've now got regions, countries where you've got people that are in power who do not support or see the world the way we do.
Everyone's grateful that Osama bin Laden is gone. Besides Osama bin Laden, is there anything about the Obama foreign policy that you think has been smart, or something that you think you would have done as well?
Well, I have to give them credit initially for perceiving the relationship between what happens in Afghanistan and what happens in Pakistan. But unfortunately, the approach they took, having emphasized that linkage, was to believe that we could withdraw militarily from Afghanistan and negotiate with Taliban. That has never been true. The Taliban simply take that as a sign of weakness, and unfortunately, the linkage that we tried to understand to prevent Pakistan from falling as well, now I think simply is going to be borne out. If Taliban retakes Afghanistan, the odds of radicals taking over the government in Pakistan, I think, goes up astronomically.